We try to focus on engine-agnostic game development on this YouTube channel, and kind of by extension of that, we don't really limit ourselves to a single platform. Hey, we've done platform tier lists and things like that. Whether you're a VR developer or you're a mobile developer or you're a PC developer or I don't know, make board games, there's probably some stuff on this channel that you can learn about. With that being said, I think you shouldn't make mobile games in 2025. And I also think you shouldn't have been making them in 2024. So this is a bit of me talking about that, because whilst I know most of our audience, you are more developers focused more on PC, for example, I do also know that, hey, if you're a Unity developer, the step from going from PC development to mobile development is basically just ticking a box in your build settings. I know it's not that easy, but like if you know Unity, you may as well learn mobile development, right? Because it's kind of an easy step. Yeah, from Unreal to mobile, for example, doesn't happen as much. But I think even with how easy it is to make mobile games, I do not think genuinely that you should, in the year of our Lord 2025, get started or like start focusing more on game development. I know I've talked to a bunch of our people in our audience who have great success with mobile game development. And of course, good job to you. But I think mobile development has changed so much in the past few years, and it's something that I get a lot of questions about, but I never truly addressed it, why I don't really like mobile game development. And I think the biggest problem that mobile game development boils down to is that it kind of suffers from the same problem as Steam, called oversaturation, just the fact of how many games there are out there, but you're in an unfair environment. And I think that is one of the biggest differences and what makes it so impossibly difficult often for indie mobile game developers to really stand out. What do I mean by this? On Steam, we talked about this before of how many games come out every day, like 40 games or something, even more. I think 2025 is going to be like 50 games a day. How are you going to stand out between all of those? And right now, the answer is pretty easy, by just making a good game and then doing some marketing. And marketing often means just getting YouTubers to cover your game. And if you have that and you get past the 10 reviews and you get out of the Steam sandbox and you get into the discovery queue, if you have a good game and you have a game that sells, that converts, Steam will keep pushing it. Steam will give you the marketing for it partially. Like Steam is not just a marketing tool, but it helps there. You do not have that on mobile, because on mobile you have that same issue of how many games are out there, but they don't have as good of an algorithm. They don't have really as much care of what are the games they're gonna be pushing. It's just advertising and it's marketing. You can't, no matter like what the conspiracy theories tell you, you can't buy your way to the Steam front page by just giving $100,000 or whatever to Steam. The only way you can guarantee buy your way to the front page is by selling like $250,000 worth of your game in like a week or something. And then Steam is like, hey, this game is selling a lot. Let's give it some more visibility because it can sell more than even. On mobile, that doesn't exist. On mobile, like if you try and like look up for any style of game, basically, the first 3 or 4 entries are usually sponsored content that aren't really linked to your game, for example, and then like there's a lot of extra garbage around it. It's really hard to find games. And I know there is a curation system still, like especially for Apple. I think you have like the game of the day. If you can get featured on the game of the day, yeah, obviously like you get the front page coverage and it sells pretty nicely. But that is something like where, yeah, every day more and more games come out. It gets harder and harder to get featured on those like fair platforms, those fair curations. And I think even with Apple, I've spoken to some developers, you kind of can also like just sneak your way into that queue if you have the right contacts, which is like, yeah, life isn't fair, Marnix, good job. But I think it gets harder because that is the issue. If games and like sales and things like that, there's a big difference between mobile development and Steam development as well. If you go to like conferences like Gamescom and DevCom, it's what I notice. You can kind of like gamify game development on mobile, if that makes sense. And this is what you see with all of the like KPI-led development that you see with mobile, with games like Clash of Clans and then whatever, where they know they have a dollar amount that they know is the average spent per user, like the LTV is what it's called, lifetime value. And let's say that the LTV is $13. So 100,000 people install the game. That means that $1.3 million will be made from those 100,000 people in total. That's their lifetime value then. So what you then have is a very simple math formula where, okay, I spent $5 on advertising and I get 1 customer. Okay, so I just made $8 in profit. So then you have a license to print money. That's how these companies work as well. Most of the mobile gaming companies and game development studios are venture capital backed, because then Once you find that out, what is my LTV and what is my CAC, my customer acquisition cost, then you just find what is the gap and how much more money can we throw at it. Because you know that, hey, if I spend 100K right now on advertising, which is like pennies for some of these game dev studios, these mobile game dev studios, and you know that you're going to get back 300K or whatever, well, you just keep throwing more and more AdSense into it. And that's why you have Raid Shadow Legends sponsoring every single goddamn YouTuber, because they know that at the end of the day, even if they pay 2K, 3K to a YouTuber to put a Raid Shadow Legends sponsor into their video, they are going to earn that back 2 times, 3 times, whatever, in lifetime value. This is something that you, poor little indie developer, just can't compete with, genuinely. Yeah, you can maybe do like some advertising and you can get like, I think like Google ads, you get like, oh, if you buy for $200, you get like $200 extra or whatever. They do like these styles of promos, but that is too little. Like $400, $500, that is what a lot of the other studios, the big studios that you're competing with at the end of the day, spend in like a day, or they spend even more in a single day in advertising. And this is, I think, one of the bigger problems that has made it so unapproachable. Like also when you go to these gaming events like the Gamescom and the DevCon, they have like expo areas where you have a lot of like technologies being showcased of like service providers and whatever, and you see so many like advertisement optimization companies that use like AI to increase like customer acquisition cost and lifetime value and whatever, because those are at the end of the day way bigger money makers as well. There's more money in game development for mobile because there's a bigger audience, because it's not just like hip 30-year-olds and 20-year-old kids and whatever, but it's also like the richest generation you have, basically like baby boomers, retired like people with a lot of income, a lot of time, and they're learning how to use their iPad for Farmville or whatever. It's also something that when we went to Unity Unite 2 years ago, I made a video about it where I was kind of disappointed by it, by the fact that at the end of the day, Unity even isn't really focused on indie game development on PC anymore. Like, yeah, sure, they do still do stuff, but especially back then, they were really pushing, like, I think it's called like Unity Grow, which is like the monetization and the advertising and all of the extra stuff that you would do with mobile development. And none of those things really mattered for PC gaming. The second thing, because this was kind of a long thing, the second thing is the way you make money. Like I said, you have that lifetime value that you figure out from your game. How do you make that money? This is more complicated. And on the one hand, like I said, you can earn more, which is like, oh yes, but I can earn more on mobile, you said, right? The problem is it's much more complicated as well to correctly earn money on mobile. Basically, back in like 10 years ago, when mobile was still growing and when most of the people in our audience who have had success already started releasing their games on mobile, you could still do paid mobile games. But even then, there was already a discrepancy where you couldn't ask the same price for a game on PC as you could for the same game on mobile. There was just no way you could do that, really. That has changed even more, where there is almost no game anymore that you can just charge money for upfront, like a one-time payment, and you get it ad-free and whatever, and you can play that game. Because there is like this mental thing where nobody wants to pay for mobile games. Everything right now basically has to be free to play, so you can get the initial user base, because you need like, it goes even deeper into like the KPIs and whatever. There's a video I made about like a book club long-term game that is from like a mobile studio manager who talks about how do they do all these things. It's things about like, hey, how many returning users do you have after 7 days, after 2 weeks, after a month and whatever. You really want to focus on just a giant quantity of people with these styles of games. And that is what free-to-play does. The problem is you still have to pay your bills at the end of the day, right? So that's when it gets more complicated with, okay, how are we going to earn money? Because what used to be the traditional approach, like, oh, you throw in some banner ads or whatever, kind of doesn't make a lot of money anymore. It's now more intrusive ads, and it really needs to be in your face for it to make much money. But then you have the problem, okay, it's kind of a shit experience. So you have things like also in-app purchases, battle passes, gacha boxes, loot boxes, whatever. People do still buy it, no matter what your opinion on that is, like ethically, it is still what a lot of the baby boomers and the older generations, they just blindly walk into that. But that means that you also have to manage more of those payments. That's also like, once again, going back to those gaming conventions, right? Like a Gamescom, DevCom, they are completely bankrolled basically by an Xsola and by a Terminal 3 and like all of those service providers. Like, there is so much going on in the mobile world that I think a lot of indie developers who are like stuck in the Steam world don't fully understand how different it is as well. It's not just make game and then port it to mobile, or just make game for mobile and that's it. Like the payments and all of that, and like all the optimization. I've spoken to like a company once, and they were like super proud of how they made an AI that automatically finds out like what is the maximum amount of value we can extract out of a customer. It's like, okay, we'll look at their behavior, and it's like, okay, how much can we charge right now? If we give them a loot box, would they like pay for it like $2, or do we know like, yeah, these guys have more money, like more disposable income from previous purchases, so we ask like $10 for that same thing? It's so different. It's so much more monetization focused, and at the end of the day, most of our audience just wants to make games. They don't want to focus on the money, right? That is another thing that kind of makes it hard, where yeah, maybe you want to make mobile games, but you want to sustain it because you almost need to make money from the game if you want to then make sure other people can play the game through the advertising and things like that. It's not really an easy approach. And then some smaller things that I do still think you need to keep in mind is that especially now mobile on Android has changed a lot, where not everyone is comfortable with this, but you now have to put your like legal name and your like house address, or like your company address, which for a lot of developers is their house address, needs to be publicly visible on the Play Store. For me in Belgium, this is kind of normal if you run a company that you have to make it public. I know not everyone is as comfortable with that, which okay, it's fine. You don't need to do that on Steam, for example. And what's also new is that now you need to get over 20 playtesters if you want to release your game on the Play Store. It's kind of like a sandbox environment where you can't just upload your APK file and then immediately have it be like available for everyone. At least 20 people need to have done like playtests for it through like the playtest program. Finding 20 people is kind of hard sometimes. Like definitely it's something that you're probably going to have to pay for, which is annoying. It's something that as an indie developer you may not have the same amount of funds for. It's something once again that is kind of making that barrier harder for the smaller indie devs making real games and whatever. And it's like, yeah, if you're a VC funded hyper casual game studio, yeah, you don't really care. You have like some click farm in like a low income country that does that for you. And then a final thing is as well that you just have device and input limitations. I think it's something like, okay, making a game to begin with often isn't the easiest, but now you also have to think about, okay, I only have a touchscreen and I need to make sure that I don't blow up like the device that my player is using, because maybe they're using the latest iPhone, which is like the A55 Bionic Super Max chip, whatever, that is super fast. Or maybe they're running like, you know, basically a Nokia brick phone from like 2013 with an old crusty ARM CPU running on Android 4.4 or something. Those are things you need to keep in mind as well. Yeah, you have similar things on PC, but overall like the baseline minimum spec from PCs is much more powerful than like old phones, for example. So you have to deal with optimization for that, and you're going to be way more limited in, okay, the assets you use. You need to be much more conscious about what am I doing here. Inputs is a big limiting factor as well, because suddenly everything needs to be done with touchscreen, so certain genres get really hard to make work well on mobile. Those are some things that you are making it harder for yourself. Like you can overcome those issues. You can overcome all of these issues, but it is definitely going to be a bit more of a struggle that once again, you are going to have to deal with more than a hyper casual like studio or whatever. Now, there are some benefits as well, of course, to mobile. And I think the first one is that the scope of your games can often be a lot smaller. You're focusing a lot more on those super short like play times, like 1 to 3 minute long sessions, for example, of like, hey, I'm in the grocery store and I'm waiting in line for some girl to have like 50 coupons before me. Let me whip out my phone and do a quick game of something. Very much smaller gameplay loops, smaller games in total, so faster development cycles as well. I keep bringing this up, but I've talked to some hyper casual mobile studios, and it's like, yeah, they release a game almost every day or a game a week at most. That's like a long development cycle, 1 week of development on a game. That is very different than going on Steam. Like Steam is like the shortest dev cycle you can do, basically. It's like a month. Those are some things as well to keep in mind. And like the quality of game, you've seen those ads as well for like the crappy mobile games, can be a lot lower, because once again, a lot of your audience is like, you know, your mom and the baby boomers and my grandma and whatever. And they aren't always as like critical of the games that they play, especially since most of them are free at the end of the day and they get money other ways, whatever. That is an advantage if you really are like, oh, I keep overscoping my games. Yeah, making a mobile game can help with maybe reducing that scope. The second really good thing, and maybe I should have said this earlier in the video because like 70% of y'all have clicked off at this point, is validating game ideas and game loops and kind of getting playtesters for your game, so to say, can work as well if you have some disposable budget. I've talked to some developers who they were working on a Steam game, and what they did is they had a game that was also capable of working on mobile. So they first made a mobile version, and then they spend a few $1,000s in advertising cost, and then they got like 50,000 users in total, because the cost of getting a user is relatively low, especially in the beginning, and they just used that 50,000 people as like their data sample pool to find out how fun is this game, what are people doing. You throw in a ton of analytics and all of that, you track everything they're doing, because they're not as strict on mobile as they are on like Steam and whatever with all of that as well. And then you take that data and you put it in the Steam game. Now, Steam and mobile, they don't have a perfect 100% overlap. Like certain games that you release on Steam wouldn't work on mobile at all, and certain mobile games wouldn't release on Steam at all. But it is still really nice to have that kind of like easy access point of, okay, try and validate this game idea. Does it work? Now, yeah, you're not going to be making Civilization 7 on mobile most likely, but it is still something that you can do. These are some of my thoughts about mobile. Maybe I am completely wrong and you're like, oh my god, Marnix, I made $50,000 last year with mobile games and it changed my life, whatever. Maybe, but I don't think that we will ever be venturing into mobile development. I don't think you should do so either, especially if you don't have like any prior experience with mobile game development and things like that. Yes, it's easier to make games for mobile with Unity and all of that, and you have like these full-on template packs on the Unity Asset Store of like runner games and whatever. It's not actually developing the game that's the hard part on mobile, it's making sure more than 2 people will ever be able to play your game. Those are my thoughts. How has been mobile development for you? Because I know a bunch of our audience has been doing mobile development. Leave me your thoughts and comments down below as well. Do you still suggest it to new people in 2025? Are there like certain things that you need to keep in mind? Let me know in the comments down below. I love to hear from you guys as well, because hey, maybe I am wrong. Maybe you do think I'm stupid, and then please tell me why you think so. That's all I really to say. If you're new here, we make 2 videos every week talking about game development and the things that I've been learning on this journey as well along the way. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to head down below and subscribe. It makes me happy, and you get these videos, like I said, delivered to your inbox twice a week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!